This video is about the common Saginaw steering boxes that are out there, and a lot of GM full-size, Jeep, passenger cars, about a million different things out there, and how to calculate the volume of these different steering boxes and the volume of all the different hydraulic assist options out there, and kind of figure out how much of a gain you're going to get percentage wise with hydraulic assist over a stock steering box, and what kind of flow you might need to support that system, if it's a realistic expectation or not, which can be important, especially if it's a street rig and you might need to do some maneuvers in a parking lot and you need your steering to react quickly. You might want to be a little bit more on the conservative side instead of the log splitter side of hydraulic assist. So here are two pistons. Out of the one on the left is a Jeep, and then the one on the right is a GM full size. And you can see the one on the right is a little bit larger in diameter. So the Jeep and a lot of full size cars have the same size as 2 3/4 inches in diameter, and then the GM full size one on the right is 3 1/8 inches in diameter. So let's go to the chart here, and so we're going to say that the stroke stock steering box, stock Saginaw box, is going to be 2 inches. And honestly, it's not really quite 2 inches, but it's really darn close to 2 inches. And the stroke in the box depends on a lot of things, and it depends on the application it was built for the OEM, because that's how Saginaw limited the travel of the pitman arm was by limiting stroke inside the box with snap rings at one end and a different cap on the other that either was deeper or shallower to block the piston. So anyway, 2-inch stroke, that's what we're going with. It's close enough. So you might have a junkyard box and you might not really know what diameter piston it has in it. You don't really want to yank it apart, and so just measure the diameter of the hole where the aluminum end cap goes. And if it's a 3-inch diameter cap, it's a 2 3/4 inch piston. And if it's a 3.5-inch diameter cap, well, then it's a 3 1/8 inch piston. So let's figure out the area of these pistons. Oops. So a 2 3/4 inch piston has 1 3/8 radius. And so 1 3/8 inches times 1 3/8 inches times 3.14 equals 5.94 square inches of area. And so 5.94 square inches times 2 inches of stroke equals 11.88 cubic inches. And that's for the Jeep and passenger car size boxes that are out there. And then you go with the larger box, like in a GM full size, you have a 3 1/8 inch piston. So that's got 1.5625 inch radius. So that squared times 3.14 works out to be 7.67 square inches of area. And so 7.67 times 2 inches of stroke equals 15.34 cubic inches of volume in a GM full-size box. So that's what you're working with stock. And so that's just kind of an important number to keep track of, because that's what your vehicle is dealing with lock to lock, and that's the effective volume of it in stock form. And so any improvement you make with hydraulic assist, pretty much all you have to do is figure out the volume of the hydraulic assist cylinder and then divide it by your stock, and you're going to figure out what kind of improvement you're going to see. And you're going to see that even with a really conservative small cylinder, it's pretty realistic to get almost a double improvement. I mean, you're getting like an 80-90% improvement with a pretty small ram. And you can go as ridiculous as you want, but the problem with going ridiculous is you end up with such a high volume lock to lock that you end up needing a huge pump. And well, a huge pump equals moving a lot of oil, and moving a lot of oil means making a lot of heat, because when you're not steering the thing, all that is just going in an open loop system, and all it's doing is just making heat. So anyway, let's talk about how to figure out the volume of your hydraulic assist system. And so that depends on two things. And the first thing is the diameter of the hydraulic assist cylinder piston. And the second thing that matters, it's more important, is the travel of the hydraulic assist piston and the cylinder. And so you need to know the lock-to-lock travel of where you're going to attach your hydraulic assist to a fixed point. And so it doesn't matter where you're going to attach it, you're going to probably attach it on a tie rod. And you might be using who knows what brand of steering arms, or you might be using a stock point, and you just need to figure out how far it is from lock to lock, what that distance is. So for me, I got a Dana 60, and I've got off-road design high steer arms, and on my rig it works out to be about 5.2 inches from lock to lock. So that means I'm going to end up using a 6-inch travel ram, and I'm going to physically limit it to 5.2 inches of travel because I'm going to build an 8/10 of an inch spacer and put it inside. And the reason why I do that is just so that I don't bang up the steering stops or anything else and put undue stress on it, because there's really no reason to try to push your steering further than it can possibly go. So here we go. Let's figure out some numbers. So an 1.75 diameter ram, real common PSC is 7/8 of an inch radius times 7/8 of an inch equals 0.761. That times pi, 3.14, it equals to 2.39 square inches of area. So that piston is 2.39 square inches. So that times 5.2 inches of stroke works out to be 12.43 cubic inches. So I take 12.43 and I divide it by 15.34 because I have a GM full size. Works out to be an 81% improvement. And so that means that I'm going to have 81% more power than stock. And it also means that I'm going to need 81% more fluid flow, or it's going to be 81% slower than stock. And really, that's a pretty conservative setup of the 1.75 diameter piston with a nice short stroke. And honestly, it's pretty streetable. And I do have hydro assist brakes, and if I stab the brakes, I kind of lose a little bit in the steering, but that's kind of the nature of the beast. So let's say we step it up and go with a 2-inch diameter piston. So that's a 1-inch radius times 1 inch is 1 times 3.14 works out to be 3.14. So 3.14 times 5.2 inches of stroke works out to be 16.33 cubic inches in a 2-inch ram that's moving 5.2 inches. And that, 16.33 divided by 15.34 works out to be 106% increase. And so, it's pretty easy to double the amount of force that your steering can dish out, which is pretty impressive. And you can go beyond that if you really want to, but you're gonna make sacrifices in other areas. You're gonna lose speed, and you're gonna have to move a ridiculous amount of fluid. And what's the fun of it if you can't keep it cheap? So let's look at the volume of some of the common cylinders out there. So on the left here is piston diameter, so 1.5 inch, 1.75, 2-inch. Pretty much everybody's running one of these three. And then so with an 1.5 diameter piston, the area of the piston is 1.77 square inches. An 1.75 is 2.39 square inches. A 2-inch piston is 3.14 square inches. And so we take that and multiply it by some common strokes. And like here's a 6-inch stroke to give you the volume, and then here's an 8-inch stroke. So this will give you an idea of what it is. And really, if you figure out what your stroke is and you know the bore, you can just take whatever your stroke is and multiply it by the area in square inches, and you're going to come up with the cubic inches of your setup. And you can really see that if you have a 2-inch cylinder, you can get some really ridiculous volumes, especially when you start getting to a longer stroke like you might use with a stock tie rod setup. So again, it's just a ballpark, and you can kind of figure things out, and it's kind of important to know your lock to lock displacement of the total system, because that's going to give you an idea of how fast you can turn from lock to lock. And so 1 gallon is 231 cubic inches, and an optimistic number on a power steering pump might be 4 or 5 gallons per minute, but that's 4 or 5 gallons per minute when you've got your foot in the throttle a little bit, not when it's idling along. So, really think about that, and possibly think about going with the smallest system that you can stomach, because it's going to let you turn quicker, and it's going to let you keep with a more reasonable pump. Like you might be able to just take a regular old Saginaw pump and drill it out to 530 seconds and bump up the pressure on it by taking the spacers out of it and call it good, instead of having to go with some crazy aftermarket high dollar pump. So anyway, That's the math behind it, and I hope you find it useful.